Hey guys, Tyler Erzberger here with ESPN Esports, and today I am joined by ESPN Esports' FPS expert, Jacob Wolf, to talk about Valorant, Riot's upcoming FPS game that is coming soon this summer. Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself, Tyler? Are you holding up okay in Los Angeles quarantine?
I am doing my best. Valorant's one of the only things that we can kind of look forward to since a lot of other things are being postponed or derailed. But I want to talk to you because you are our FPS expert. You are our Counter-Strike expert. And I think everyone can see very similar imagination when it comes to Valorant and CSGO. Can you just give us a little bit of details from your point of view as our CS expert?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of influence here from what I've seen so far from game footage and sort of hearing about various things around Valorant, including like Henry G's thread from when he played in the Riot EU office a few weeks ago. It seems very much that a lot of the designers involved with Valorant are big Counter-Strike fans, and it definitely influenced the way that they played. The way that it's different in Counter-Strike, obviously, is that there are these tactical abilities in the sense that each character has different tactical abilities. It's very similar to Team Fortress or Overwatch in that regard. But from a pure gunplay perspective, it looks very Counter-Strike-esque. The pace seems a little bit faster than Counter-Strike, but not as fast as something like Call of Duty, where you're moving very frequently and not very stable. Obviously, you're not rewarded in Counter-Strike for that. Movement while shooting is very bad in Counter-Strike, and so that's I expect Valorant to be similar. But it does seem like it's a little bit of a unique take here relative to the FPS genre and what exists out there right now currently.
Yeah, so instead of 30 rounds, there's 25 rounds, and instead of a bomb, it's a spike. Do you see these like changes by Riot to make it a more family-friendly CS? Because I think most people coming into esports see CS as the king of FPS. It's been around for so long. It dominates viewership. It doesn't matter what teams are really playing. It almost seems like viewership's always there. It's a beloved game. Do you think Riot sees the success of CS and how great of a game it is and says, hey, what if we just made this family friendly so, sponsors and everything could, jump on board because, counter-terrorists, terrorists, bombs, now you're throwing in, anime-like characters and a spike instead of a bomb.
Yeah, I think that this is a result of where sort of Counter-Strike is in its history, right? There's been a lot of discussion previously around changing the bomb and changing terrorists and counter-terrorists to something else in Counter-Strike. That's been a debate we've had on shows here, but also has happened a lot online. I think that if you were to do that in Counter-Strike, you would be met with stark resistance because people are used to what they've had for the past 20 years. I think the advantage here for Riot is that there are sponsors that are turned off by the terrorist, counter-terrorist, and bomb monikers of Counter-Strike. That's just the matter of fact. And I've heard that from a lot of people who have tried to commercialize Counter-Strike in certain ways, that there are just sponsors that don't want to touch it. But rather than making a change there, I think that Riot has the advantage of developing a game in 2020 where it's sort of the ecosystem around various different things in politics and guns and everything else, like where there is a sensitivity there. I think that Riot has the advantage of making a game in 2020 with that hindsight rather than a game that was developed in the 2000s and Counter-Strike is a mod of Half-Life where that was, it was community built originally, and therefore like those concerns aren't taken into account by a massive AAA developer company like Riot Games. So I think that there's an opportunity for them. I don't want to give the illusion that they would take down Counter-Strike in any sort of way, because I think Counter-Strike will remain incredibly relevant in the esports space. But Riot now has 20 years of vision around the entire world to assess sort of what is out there versus Counter-Strike, which made decisions 20 years ago and has had to stick with them.
I completely agree. I don't see CS going anywhere. I think the best case scenario is that both of these games push each other. It makes Valve care more about Counter-Strike because the fans of Counter-Strike want the attention that Dota gets. Dota gets, the TI, the prize pool, everything, where it feels like Counter-Strike's the red step,
redheaded stepchild. Yeah.
And in the relationship. And they want that respect. They want that, Do you see a best case scenario where Valorant comes out, they bring out all these new tools, all these, accessories, and it pushes Valve to actually, push more into CSGO and makes it, because there hasn't been a challenger to CS in a long time. So this is the really first big challenger. Do you think Valve's going to take notice, or do you think they're going to keep their 50 foot approach and just kind of let everyone else deal with it as per usual with Valve?
Yeah, you're right. Valve does have a very laissez-faire approach, similar to Nintendo. Also, Valve's a little bit more involved than Nintendo, but certainly still they are comparable to one another in the fact that they are massive developers and they sort of have to deal with this. I think the big thing here that goes unsaid is Counter-Strike has failed to penetrate the Asian market in a way that particularly like Crossfire and other FPS games have. I think that's the big thing here. If Valorant really takes off in China, South Korea, and other parts of Asia, that's going to be really big for Valve, and they're going to have to reassess how they deal with it, right? I think that one of the things that makes League of Legends such a cut above others, and particularly as it pertains to esports, but also in player base, is Asia. There are a lot of people that live in Asia. Internet infrastructure is much better in Asia than it is in other parts of the world. And free-to-play games take off significantly. We've seen this over time, right? This is why we've seen PUBG be bigger in places like South Korea than Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike it's been released in certain parts of Asia. There are Chinese and Asian teams that participate in Counter-Strike competition, but there certainly is not as much of an ecosystem for it as there is other games like Crossfire. So I think that if Valorant takes off, I think that Valve will have to, particularly in Asia, I think that Valve will have to reassess how they're handling their business. And I do think that Valve is going to have to pump. My prediction for Valorant Esports is that Riot will be heavily involved, similar to how they are in League of Legends, because it is a team-based game, unlike Legends of Runeterra and TFT, which are their other titles. I think that they will be very, very, very involved in pushing the Valorant esports ecosystem, and Valve is going to have to wake up a little bit. And I think Valve pays attention to this more than people give them credit to. Valve is sort of a hands-off, omniscient sort of company. They look at everything in the game system. Hell, they own the biggest games market on PC, right? And Steam. They pay attention. Whether they act or not is different, and this may be the one thing that makes them act.